Okay guys, we're going to go through the finalized workup on the Weiand Street Warrior for the EQ Vortec 383 project. We can see inside the plenum, got quite a bit of work, all right? Yeah, the blue dicom, that'll wash out when I put it through the parts washer. I'm not worried about that now. This actually turned out really nice. Really like that giant plenum. And I was able to get, good access to almost everything in there. Nice radius on the bottom of the plenum. That worked out nice. Okay. Okay, you'll see a bunch of flows on each port. And, oh no. All right, so we had a small mishap. It seems that intake port number 1 with this real short, tight runner was by far our lowest flowing port. So while working on it, we had a slight issue where we made a hole through the apex of the turn. So that needed to be repaired. Now, if the owner of this manifold has a problem with that, I will just purchase a different manifold. But I will tell you right now, I'm not putting as many hours into the next manifold as I put into this, because this really got a serious workover because it was only rated at 5,500 RPM, and we're going to be running it more than that. So it needed a lot of effort. I should explain how I prep for an epoxy repair. The entire area will be burred. Then I'll take an 1/8 inch drill bit and I'll drill a bunch of holes, but not all the way through the casting, just deep enough that the epoxy has something to bite onto. Okay. Then we use, this stuff is actually quite good. This is the professional JB Weld. While you're mixing it, guess what? Mix in a bunch of ground up aluminum. A bunch of it. Gives it some body. And when you're grinding it, do not breathe it. Stuff is not good to breathe. It's very much an irritant. You can see I had a little piece of foam in here, so I didn't need as much epoxy. And what's really funny is I was not able to get this apex where it would flow where I wanted to. After I burned a hole in it and some epoxy dripped on the inside, that bump made enough turbulence to increase the flow around there. You can actually see there's still just a little bump all the way inside there. That helps the flow, believe it or not, so that's going to stay. Okay, I actually had to finish it with a different texture even to get the flow where I wanted to. Now, if you take a look at... All right. Here's our chart of all our flows. The lowest flow where we started was 235.6. That was already ported out. Okay, all the numbers on this. It wasn't flow tested on the bench. I modified my bore adapter so I can bolt an intake directly to the bore adapter. No clamps, no nonsense. Bolt it right to it with a Holley gasket. No leaks, no nothing. You can see how much work it took to get it up to 244. That's the best I could do, and that's by far our worst port. I want to show you the flow numbers, and I want to show you each individual port. Okay? That's a lower H, and it's got that real tight bend on it. What I think is really interesting is Holley advertised these as designed by CFD, Computational Fluid Dynamics. Well, that's all well and good, but I know a guy that actually does that. A guy named Woody. Guy's a mega mind. Literally hard for me to understand what the guy's talking about. And that's the kind of guy you need that's figuring out your computational fluid dynamic in order to get it right. There was a couple things on this manifold that I personally do not think were done right, as far as the taper and the shape of these runners. And like this is runner number 3. Runner number 3, I got that up to 278 CFM. That's nice. That's one of those long. That's one of the long ports on the top side, right? That's a top H, and this is another long port. 5 is another long port on the top. That's actually nice. You can see right down into the plenum, where I got that nice radius right from the plenum right into the runner. That worked out nice. Can I see that on this one? Pretty good, right? Basically, you get as much of that as you can get. You know, it's only a 6-inch burr, and that's a pretty long port. So it's tough to get all the way in there. So port number 5, 271. So 5 and 3 are the 2 longest ports. H means upper H, right? L means lower H. The upper H's are bigger ports to begin with. We would expect them to flow more. But between 278 and 271, that's pretty good as far as flowing each in comparison to each other. Okay, this is port number 7. This is a really interesting design because it's a lower H. No. Yeah, it's a lower H with the tight bend, but look what they did to this one. They pop it up. Look at how they pop it up. Okay, much more so than they did on the front one. This isn't popped up as much. All right, I actually lowered that. Well, it's upside down, so I raised that roof quite a bit to get the flow even where we are. And it's not worrisome thin, but I took a lot of metal out of that to get it to where it is. But I think it's interesting. Like if you take a look at how this port is designed, it's just weird. It is just weird. It comes out and then the roof goes way high, and it's actually, you know, laid. One port is laid on top of the other port, so it's they're in the way. So you machine out as much as you can, get that radius where you can try to get the airflow around it. I was able to get 252. Actually, my last flow on that was 257. So that's my highest discrepancy between port 7 and port 1, because I couldn't bring port 1 up enough. Okay, port 2. Best we got out of port 2 is 263. Not a terrible shaped port. Actually, that was fairly good, fairly straightforward, right? That port. Port 4, a little more difficult because that's the real stubby runners, and they come in at a funny angle, right? So I was actually surprised they flowed as well as they did. But you can see you can actually get to that whole, basically get to that whole port because it's so short. With a 6-inch burr, you can get in there and work on it. Now you got to remember these, you know, they're much smaller. It's a lower H, so it's a smaller port, and they didn't raise it up enough. So it's tough to do it. So what did we wind up getting on this? This was port 4. I got 248 out of it. Not great, but not terrible. Heads are flowing, what, 241? So not terrible. Okay, number 6. Another stubby port coming in at an angle. All right, lower H, very short. Raise the roof as much as you can. This one was really, the way they did it, I mean, if you see the way the upper H goes around, these two overlap, there was a big triangle in this corner, and the flow was really quite terrible when I started. It was only 239.4 when I started. I got up to 248.6. So this is 248.6, and this one's 248. So they're both of those stubby ports are quite close to each other. Okay. And that is port 8. Port 8 flows 263. So between port 8 and port 2, 263, almost identical, right? Oh, they are identical. 248, 248.6, almost identical, right? And it also goes by, these are almost the same shape runners. 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 This is by far the worst one. I can't tell you how much work I put into that, and I just cannot get it. Cannot get it better than that. There's something else going on there. But at 244, we're still covering our cylinder head, so I'm not really worried about it. The low numbers were after the first port. 235.6, 270, 262.7, 246.6, 254.3, 236.5, 239.4, and 252. So you can see we got a good increase on all of them. Okay? You can still see, right? These two ports are similar shape. These two ports are similar shape. All right. These are our two longer ports. And these two are similar shape. So we've got 4 different length runners, and we've got 4 different, basically, flows. We've got the real long ones, 278. These guys are 263, right? They're upper H's. We would expect them to flow more because they have bigger ports. And then these guys are 244, 257. And then the little tiny ones are 248, 248.8. Overall, I'm actually quite happy the way it turned out. Am I upset about the repair? I got carried away. I'm like, oh, I just need a touch more in this corner and I've got it. And then you make a hole. But it flowed better afterwards. So that's sometimes the way things happen, you know. You can see I'm only using 2 studs. I machined out the bore adapter so I can bolt that directly to it. And that's really good. I actually did some testing on some other intake manifolds. Really, really interesting stuff. I have that one Holley that's completely stock. I may take all my readings off of that stocker and port it out and see the difference. Actually, I remembered I already measured that. Now, here, let's take a look at that. Okay. So, there's the Street Warrior. Here's the Holley. This is a Holley 701r-48. It's actually designed for a 4-barrel projection, which is what I got on my old work truck, come to think of it. And it's completely stock on the inside. It hasn't been touched. So I did some flows on that. So here, lower H, 212. By the way, this is designed like the Edelbrock Performer, right? Upper H's are bigger, lower H's are smaller. So we would expect a decent difference between the flows. But we can also go right against where we wound up on our ported one. Because I know the Edelbrock Performers with a little tuning up make really good power. You can look them up. there's actually unported Edelbrock performers that have eclipsed 500 horsepower, which is pretty impressive. I couldn't actually find anything on this manifold, but the design is similar enough. It's not going to be much different. Okay, lower H was 212.2, right? And that was our worst. That was our worst flowing port at 244. That's a noticeable difference, right? And 3 is upper H, right? These have got much bigger, nicer shaped ports. That flowed 268. It looks like 259.2. Okay, at 278, 271, a nice pop-up. And this is port 7, 226, and we're at 260. All right. H is for upper H, L is for lower H, right? 257 and change. 263. 219. 248. 227.2. 248.6. 262.4. 263. So you can see the upper H's on this flow quite well. They're all in the 260s, right? 260, 257 and change, 268, 259. Really not bad, the upper H. The lower H needs some help. But we know that those different size runners make it a really nice street manifold. All right, you get the extra torque from the smaller runners, and you get the RPM and the horsepower out of the bigger runners. All right, guys. I think that was enough. Now, you know what? Just take a quick look at how these are made. I'm not going to shine the light through them, but that upper H is pretty darn big, right? Lower H, same size as what we're running in that Weiand, almost exactly. All right, upper H, lower H. And you can see the shape on the bottom, right? Similar, but not the same, right? These, I actually like the way these are shaped coming out of the plenum better than the Weiand. The Weiand come in very, very steep angle. I like this better, but I also like the bigger plenum on the Weiand. So I think they should have just brought them into the plenum in a different way. These I actually prefer. These have a better shape too, really. And Holley's, I don't even think Holley makes this anymore. I'm not sure if they're still making this. But Holley's not making a lot of manifolds anymore. They kind of took over Weiand, and that's all you're really going to see nowadays. All right, guys. Thanks.